And hello, Jets fans. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for the slight delay, some technical issues, but we are live here previewing the New York Jets versus the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend. So much to get into on this episode. We will be taking your questions, including some in the mailbag. We have a lot to talk about, including the New York Jets quarterbacking decision. But we're going to start off with something that happened recently. And I also want to let you guys know about the preview. These will be taking place on Fridays, but this Friday, I unfortunately have an engagement. So that's why this is coming on Thursday. But let's get right into it. So before I preview the game, before I talk about the quarterback situation, which I know is the big topic everyone wants to get to, I did want to touch on something that happened yesterday. That was Woody Johnson coming out in support of Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, basically giving them the vote of confidence. And I saw a lot of Jet fans were angry on Twitter about this. And look, you have every right to be angry about that. But my opinion of the whole matter was, what else is Woody Johnson going to say about this head coaching staff? What else is he going to say about Joe Douglas? I mean, that's really the gist of it. Like, I saw a lot of Jet fans, and the reaction was, oh, how could he be saying that? Shouldn't he be more upset? Like, as a fan, you have every right to be upset, and you have every right not to trust them, because really the last decade where they haven't been to the playoffs, and it's more or less been the last 5 years, because the first 5 years they were up and down. The Jets had that opportunity to go to the playoffs in 2015. I mean, look, they were not good, but they weren't a laughing stock. In the last 5 years, it feels like the Jets have been a laughing stock. And I get where the Jets fans' anger is coming from. I get where the frustration is coming from. But at the same time, you have to understand that a lot of what these owners and coaches are saying, it's coach speak, it's owner speak. I mean, Woody Johnson isn't going to come out and basically blast this coaching staff. I bet behind closed doors he's not happy, but he's not publicly going to embarrass this coaching staff. He's not going to embarrass this front office. And I just believe that really he understands that, because they've made so many quick judgments, because the Jets have been so trigger happy with coaches, members of the front office, that is why that they have to be more patient this time, that they have to be more willing to let this develop. And look, there's going to be a lot of growing pains this year, absolutely no question. But I just felt that a lot of people with the comments were like, I want to see him angry. I want to see him upset. I want to see him visibly pissed off. But that would just create more problems. That would just create more headlines. That would just create more tension. So with the Woody Johnson comments, look, it is what it is. But if he's wondering why Jet fans are so pissed, it's easy to see why Jet fans are so pissed from all the stuff that they've had to endure the last decade, all the embarrassing games, and they just want to be a competitive football team. And I completely understand that. And the Jets deserve to put a competitive football team on the field. So we will get to your questions in a little bit. Of course, if you're just joining us in the live chat, make sure to put your questions in the live chat. I will make sure to get to them right away. But I'm going to start with the preview right now. And the big thing was the question of who is going to be the Jets starting quarterback. Conventional wisdom was that it was going to be Joe Flacco, but that is not the case. Robert Saleh has announced that Mike White will be the quarterback. And from multiple reports, it appears that Flacco will be inactive. So Josh Johnson will be the backup quarterback. And I just think it's going to be very interesting, because I think a lot of people felt that, including myself, that Flacco was at least going to be active. So it's clear that they want him to learn the playbook a little bit more. And the other thing, too, is the big reason for Flacco coming in, it isn't to win 4 games. It isn't to make this team significantly better for 4 games. Really, it's to hold down the fort, but more importantly, be a good mentor for Zach Wilson and use this time period, the 2 to 4 weeks, more likely the 4 weeks, to basically help him in the film, him in game prep, help him get ready for the games, and help him to hit the ground running when he comes back from his injuries. So this actually ties in great to one of the questions that I did receive from Grafton Wilkins. Haven't really noticed anyone bring up the fact, but the offense seemed to run smoother under Mike White at the end of the game. I wouldn't like make Zach sit and catch up to speed. Looks like the speed of the game is still too much for Zach. Just looks uncomfortable. Mike looked like he's been there before. Well, the funny thing is Mike hasn't been there before because that was his first ever career NFL start. And there's two things with Mike White that I think are good, but also very concerning. So let me start off with the positive, and that is in some ways, Mike White, it's better that he's limited because he understands like he doesn't have an arm like Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson can make any throw on the football field, he can make a highlight worthy 50-yard throw. Mike White understands that he doesn't have that arm. Mike White understands that he has to be more efficient. So in this offense, it's about getting the ball to your playmakers in space and getting the ball quickly. And Mike White really understands that. And I mean, Zach Wilson will hold the ball because he's looking for a big shot downfield, where White understands that, look, I don't have the arm. I don't have the arm strength. I don't have that big playability. I have to just get the ball out quick, go through my progressions. And really, that's a good thing because you look at a lot of guys like Jameson Crowder, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, just get the ball to them quickly within 5 yards and let them make a play. And you saw in the screen game, he was accurate against the Patriots. So in some ways, his limitations actually help. And I believe with this coaching staff, it might help a little bit just in terms of the game plan, just helping him to basically go through those assignments, go through those reads. But I do believe the stats are misleading. He was 20 of 32 for almost 200 yards in that Patriot game. But I was there, and when I was watching the game, especially late, a lot of those completions came on running back screens, on quick checkdowns. It really wasn't pushing the ball down the field. And the few times that he did try to push the ball down the field, he ended up getting picked off twice. So, I mean, did Mike White look better than I thought he would? Yes. But am I still concerned that he's this weekend starting quarterback? Absolutely. Do I think Joe Flacco is the better quarterback of the three? Yes. But there's also a reason why Joe Flacco is a backup quarterback now. So I just believe that a lot of this is just him not being up to speed with the game plan, him not being able to pick that up quickly. And look, could there be a case we see Josh Johnson this game just because he's done everything in this league? He's been around. Absolutely. But in terms of Mike White, I just feel like he's going to be in some ways a little bit more, he's going to be a more efficient quarterback than Zach Wilson was, but you're also going to be very limited in what you can do with Mike White. Now, looking at the game coming into this weekend, Jets, of course, hosting the Bengals. Bengals coming off arguably their biggest win, and I would say 5 years. Right now, Jets 10.5-point underdogs. And it's kind of funny because in some ways they're a decent matchup to the Bengals because the Bengals, like we talk about the explosiveness, we talk about the offense, but right now they're 29th out of 32 teams in terms of points. And in terms of offensive efficiency, they're bottom 5 in the league, where a lot of these plays, they're hitting the home run ball. They are not a team that is doing a lot of long, methodical drives. And the big thing for the Jets in this game is going to be figuring out a way to stop or slow down Jamar Chase. Now, outside of last week being the bad example, the one good thing about this Jet defense is they've limited the big play. They'll let you get yards. And I mean, one thing is, please tell me they've been practicing screen passes in Florham Park, because if they just get screened to death again, it's going to drive every Jet fan crazy. But like the big thing with the Bengals is they're looking for the home run ball. They're looking for the big play down the field. And you look, Jamar Chase can get the ball and take it 70 yards easy. But I do think the Jets are not going to get beat over the top. They'll give the Bengals space. The big thing is going to be, can you tackle these receivers right away? And can you limit them and not let them get those yaks, those yards after the catch? And it's going to be interesting with the coverage. I'm interested to see what corner they're going to put on Jamar Chase, or if they shift the coverage, will they move Marcus May? Will he be shadowing the coverage to one side? So it's going to be fascinating to see how the Jets really slow down what's become a prolific offense. And the good news for the Jets is the Bengals defense has been better this year, but they've been better against the pass. They're 25th against the run, which means this Jet running game has to get going. They have to be able to pound the football. They need to be able to control the clock, keep that offense off the field, and just run, run, and run. And they struggled against the Patriots, and I get where the game went last week. It got so out of hand that they couldn't even run the ball, but they have to get established the running game. They have to with Michael Carter. Hopefully Tevin Coleman's back. They have to be able to run the football and run the football effectively. And it would not surprise me the Bengals come out with a lot of those heavy fronts, 9 men in the box, 10 men in the box, because they will test Mike White down the field. But use the run game, set up some easy play actions for Mike White, get the ball out quickly, set up some wide receiver screens. Like, I would want to see them use Elijah more and more in the running game with some jet sweeps like we saw at the touchdown last week, but also just giving him the ball in space. Like, one thing I would love to see, in when the 49ers had Debo Samuel, one of the things that they like to do, and I would like to see the Jets do this more, is line Elijah more up in the backfield. Like in the shotgun, you sometimes have that two running back set where you have one each side of the quarterback. I'd like to see them put more in the backfield so maybe they can just hand the ball or set up a screen to him along the side, have him trickle out of the backfield and just get him the ball in space. That's something I would like to see a lot more. Obviously, more Denzel Mims, but who knows that situation. But it will definitely be very interesting to see how this team prevails this weekend. Once again, like, if they're going to win this football game, Mike White's going to have to be efficient, not turn the football over. They're going to have to run the football, and the defense is going to have to play a lot better. The defense, 0 sacks last week against the Patriots. That pass rush is really going to have to get going. And part of the reason with the pass rush, though, is because the Patriots were getting the ball out so quick, it almost didn't matter how good the pass rush was because they were just getting the ball out. They were screening the team to death. The good news is it appears CJ Mosley is going to be healthy for this game. Gerard Davis is trending toward playing this game, which is good because the Jets' linebacking core has been decimated with injuries. Blake Cashman, Sherwood is out now for the season. So, I mean, the Jets' defense is getting healthier, which is good. It's really going to come down to, can the Jets and the Bengals don't have a good offensive line. Can that pass rush? Can John Franklin Myers? Can Quinnen Williams? Can Bryce Huff get after the quarterback? And if they can, they should be in good shape. And I think one thing that's coming into this game, which actually helps the Jets, is two things. Number one, from the Bengals standpoint, this could easily be a big trap game for the Bengals. Because think about it, they're number one right now in the AFC. They've come off arguably their most emotional win in 5 years. They're really feeling themselves. They feel like they can easily win this division. And look, the Bengals are a funny team because they're 5-2, but I don't feel they're a good 5-2 team. They've won a lot of weird games so far this year, but hey, you are what your record is. And really, like, the one I was impressed, like, don't get me wrong, I was impressed with the Ravens game last week, but the other games watching the Bengals, I haven't been like, wow, this team looks incredible. I'm like, I see potential. I see a lot of good things, but I don't see a team that's a world beer or really a playoff team that's going to make a deep run. So it's going to be a situation where I think the Bengals can overlook the Jets, but also the Jets had got absolutely embarrassed last week. And one thing in the NFL is when you see teams get embarrassed, they come back and play a lot better the next week because they've been hearing it nonstop for the past week about how they were embarrassed, how the Patriots ran up the score, how the Patriots own the Jets. Like, all these players have been hearing it for the last week. I think you're going to see them come out fast. I still believe the Bengals are going to win this game just because the Jets still have a lot of injuries. They're missing their starting quarterback, and the Bengals just have so much explosive wide receivers on the edge. Like, this will probably be the most explosive offense they've played this year. I mean, we talked about the Falcons, and the Falcons, they have some good playmakers, but when you look at the Bengals, they have 3 really talented receivers that can go and make a play. So I do think that the Jets will beat the spread. I think this will be within a touchdown game, but I also think too that this is just going to be a tough test for them to overcome the Bengals, but it's going to be a closer game than people will give them credit for. So let's get into your questions. I've gotten a bunch once again. You can put it in the chat. We can answer your chat questions live. We got a couple in the mailbag. The mailbag will, of course, be on the channel in the community section for future questions. Salman Jets asks, after the shellacking from Foxborough, what's the team's biggest need in the draft? And I'm also going to combine this a little bit too with Broken Skull 02. What would you like to see the Jets do in the off season? So for the draft, I it's going to be interesting because I believe that the Jets, they have so many needs, but it's going to come down to, in my opinion, one of three scenarios with those first two picks in the draft. I don't see the Jets likely trading up. Maybe they trade back with the second pick to get more capital, but I believe it's going to be one of the following three combinations in the NFL draft. It's going to be two offensive linemen. It'll be an offensive lineman and an edge rusher, or an offensive lineman and a wide receiver. Because I don't think you're going to take a tight end where they're going to be picking if Seattle plays better. I don't think you're going to be taking a tight end that early in the draft. You're not going to be taking a running back. And even though there are really good corners in this draft, I believe Joe Douglas's thought process is number one, he can get a first round talent in the second round. But also, we've seen with his drafts, and when I do my mock drafts, which will be coming out later this year, and I can do a mock draft if you would like at the mid-season point, just comment below. But Joe Douglas has shown you through two drafts that he values the cornerback position less than other positions. And it's not that he doesn't value it, but he believes he can find guys later in the draft. I mean, he's found Bryce Hall, he's found Michael Carter, he's found guys on day 3 in the draft that have been contributors because he feels like, look, I can't get a good pass rusher or a offensive lineman on day 3 that's going to make an immediate impact or significantly help this team. But I can find a corner. I can find a running back. That is how he approaches the draft. And in terms of the off season, I would like to see them go out there and keep adding playmakers. Now, you can get some speculative like who's going to be a free agent this year, but I don't like to jump into that too early on what exact players because you don't know what teams are going to resign, franchise tag. There's so many moving parts with the NFL that it's impossible to predict which players will be free. But if there's a good tight end, the Jets should be after them. If there's a good offensive lineman with some upside, the Jets should be after them. And the big thing this offseason will be the first two free agencies. We've seen Joe Douglas go after guys that are in their mid-20s that are good players but really haven't hit their ceiling yet. And he's offered them good money, but really short 2-year contracts in the grand scheme of everything. Depending on how this season ends, I will be intrigued to see how he approaches this offseason because if he gets the feeling that next year is going to be his judgment year and that if they don't make the playoffs or are competing for a playoff spot after Thanksgiving, then will he change his philosophy and will he go in more on the free agents? Will he spend significantly more money? Will he put in more guaranteed money for veterans? I mean, that is something that needs to be discussed. That is something that will have to be addressed. And I'm curious to see how they go after it. I mean, I don't think that they're going to go after a high price receiver unless an Allen Robinson is available where he's a clear number one. Tight end is a position. I think running back is a position where they'll look for a solid player, but not someone that's going to break the bank. On defense, I think you're going to see them try to address the linebacker, maybe the safety position. If there's a good pass rusher on free agency, I could see them going after that. But don't forget too, they've extended John Franklin Myers. So basically, they've locked in a pass rusher that was going to be a free agent of theirs. So there's a lot about this offseason. Even Marcus May. I mean, at this point, I do not believe Marcus May is going to be dealt before the trade deadline. And I have seen reports that the Jets would just let him walk into the season, which I don't believe is a good idea. I think just franchise tag and try to get something, see what you can get. I just feel like the value right now for Marcus May is at an all-time low just because of the DUI situation hanging over and the likely suspension next year. He has to get a long-term contract. So a team that's going to want to trade for Marcus May isn't going to break the bank at the deadline. I mean, could Tampa Bay get desperate and decide, hey, we're not going to be picking high in the draft anyways? We'll throw in a third round pick. But then again, the other thing the Jets have to consider is now the compensation picks, where if Marcus May goes and signs as a free agent somewhere, is he going to get them a third round compensation pick? If that's the case, and you're not going to get better than the third round pick at the deadline, it just makes sense to let him play out the year, help him be a veteran presence for these young, especially the young players in the secondary, because you have a bunch of them. Just let him play out the year, and you still get your draft pick at the end of the season. So, from this team has got awful. Do you think Saleh fires LaFleur if the offense continues to be this bad? In terms of LaFleur, they're not going to fire him in season, but it will be interesting at the end of this season. A lot of it's going to depend on where this offense is at the end of the year and where Zach Wilson is at the end of the year. If they don't feel that they are getting the development out of Zach Wilson, and they feel that there is a veteran play caller or a play caller with experience that is in this system where the verbiage isn't going to have to significantly change, and it really won't be a huge relearning curve for Zach Wilson. Because keep in mind, the biggest worry I have is it's going to be like Sam Darnold again, where after his first season, they brought in a whole new system, a whole new offense for him to learn, and you could tell that that stunted his growth. And for Zach Wilson, I'm afraid if you bring in a new offensive coordinator, it could stunt his growth by having to learn new playbook. But like I said, if you feel there's an experienced offensive coordinator out there that runs the same system or something very similar where it's not a big significant change for Wilson, then I would consider it. But it's going to be how this team finishes. And if basically right now LaFleur has 4 weeks, I believe. I don't think the Jets are going to play Wilson until he's 100%. I don't see him coming back to week 4. And plus, then that's a little bit easier part of the schedule, like the Miami in there, week 11. It just makes a little bit more sense to not put him in and get killed against Buffalo. So I just see that they're going to let LaFleur figure this out. And look, you can't really judge these next 4 weeks because you're going to have a backup quarterback in there. But if you're LaFleur, what you have to do is basically say, okay, I can maybe use these next couple of weeks as almost like a beta test to try some crazy ideas or new ideas. So when Zach gets back, we can implement them into the offense. Because if Wilson is not where the Jets believe he should be at the end of this first season, then Saleh's going to have to consider that. And it'll be kind of a situation too where, I know Saleh handpicked the staff. I believe he picked the staff because they have a lot of potential on this staff. But once again, I believe that his thought process was, well, I have Greg Knapp as a quarterback advisor, so that's going to help with LaFleur. But with that tragic passing and with the Jets not really bringing in a veteran quarterback and with the Jets not really bringing in another veteran guy to help with that offense, it's going to be a situation where if LaFleur doesn't show significant improvement, if Zach doesn't show significant improvement, Saleh's probably going to have to make a tough decision because Saleh could love LaFleur and he could see a bright future for this kid. But if it comes down to a situation where Zach Wilson is in development and then it can bring into question Saleh's job, I believe Saleh can make a move and will make a move. But once again, it will be an offensive coordinator who is familiar with the system. I don't think they're going to bring in a completely new offensive system because that's just too much of a tall order. All right, guys, we are answering your questions in the chat. Make sure to throw them in there if you have any questions about the Jets, about the offseason, the trade deadline. But more specifically, I'm looking for questions based on this weekend. Since Joe Flacco was signed, what do you think about his role with the organization moving forward? Look, I mentioned it before. He's here to fill in for a couple games, but really it's to be the mentor for Zach Wilson. And I think the Jets are looking at this as almost like a sabbatical for Wilson where they're going, okay, we have to give up a draft pick, But if Joe Flacco can help I mean, sorry, not Sam Darnold, Jesus, Zach Wilson develop and Zach Wilson learn the playbook a little bit and help him digest the game and sit back and then have someone to talk to on the sideline when he gets back. To me, that's going to be his role to mentor. Now, could he be starting next week? I believe that if he gets up to speed with the playbook, it just makes sense. Now, could the Jets maybe in their mind think Mike White, if he plays well against the Bengals, could he maybe get a draft pick or something? I doubt it, but I just feel like Flacco is this team's best chance to win in the short term, um, especially when he gets up to speed. But once again, I think his biggest role isn't necessarily these 4 games. It's helping Zach Wilson develop. It's giving Zach Wilson another pair of eyes on this team and giving him another voice of reason within the locker room, someone to basically bounce ideas off of. Keep in mind that before Sunday, there was no tape on White. This week, the Bengals will be able to better game plan for White. Eric, I agree and disagree at the same time. For these teams now, they can see Mike White, but if you watch that game, the Jets didn't do anything crazy with that offense. The Patriots didn't really throw anything super complicated at him either. So, I mean, they have film on Mike White, but it's not exactly like overbearing. And I think you can see like from the preseason, like what Mike White's limitations are. You know what he can and can't do, and there's a lot of what he can't do. Like I said, I believe that this game plan is going to be get the ball out of his hands quick, be more conservative, try to establish the run game. But I just think that in terms of getting a better game plan, I mean, it's a lot easier to game plan for Mike White than it is for Zach Wilson. So let's see. I If I bet $8 on the Bills tying on Sunday, I get 5 cents basically. Okay. So if you have other questions, guys, I see we got some people in the live chat. Make sure to chat. Make sure to throw in what you believe about the Jets this weekend. If you have any other questions, would love to answer them. But really, I just don't see the Jets winning this weekend. Once again, I think that this will be a close game. I think that this is going to be something where the Jets actually cover in this game. Once again, 2 big reasons. Number one, they were absolutely embarrassed last week. I think that they're going to come out and play very hard. And when you see NFL teams get embarrassed, they always come out and play well. But the other thing, too, is I just think the Bengals are already overlooking the Jets. They had an emotional win last week against the Ravens. I just think that they're a young team, too. I mean, they're a young coach team. They're a young team in terms of the players. I just don't think that they have the experience to say, okay, we can't just have this letdown after a loss. I think you're going to see a bit of a letdown from them. All right, 2 questions from Solomon Jets. I'll get to the first one. Flacco is a coach's panic move or a GM's panic move? I don't think it's a panic move necessarily, but it's definitely more of a GM move. I mean, you even heard Robert Saleh on Monday saying when he was asked about the getting a veteran quarterback, said, hey, that's Joe Douglas's department. I think it's more of Joe Douglas bringing in a guy to, once again, be more of a mentor for Zach Wilson during this down period that he's going to have and maybe get 2 or 3 starts depending on how Mike White does this weekend. But Flacco isn't up to speed with the playbook. And really, when you say panic move, I mean, this isn't a team that went out and got overpaid for a backup so that they could keep competing. I mean, the Jets didn't bring in Joe Flacco to try to go 3-4. Now, are the Jets like not trying to win? No, that's crazy. I mean, Robert Saleh needs to win as many games as possible. But when you look at the schedule these next 4 weeks and who the Jets are going to trot out quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's Mike White or Joe Flacco. The Jets are going to be massive underdogs in all those games. And even with the Bengals record, this is probably the most winnable game for the Jets out of the next couple of games. Because you look at the schedule too, is then they get the disadvantage of going on the short week and playing on the Thursday night. That's going to be interesting too. Is do they feel Flacco's up to speed enough on the short week, or do they go with Mike White again in the hopes that, well, then they're going to have a full 2 weeks for Joe Flacco to get integrated with the offense and the verbiage, so then he can start likely the next 2 games after the short bye. But I don't think it's a panic move, but I do also think that Joe Douglas was kind of forced to admit that he made a mistake, which was not bringing in a veteran presence during free agency. And I was on this when Flacco was traded for this week. It was, and as Jet fans, you get why Jet fans were a bit frustrated with this, because it was, we just gave up a draft pick for a guy that we literally could have re-signed. Although the big misconception is Flacco signed with the Eagles this offseason because he felt that he could play or had a chance to earn the starting job there. But since they brought in Gardner Minshew, since they seem to be trying to develop Jalen Hurts, that hasn't happened. And at least Flacco gets an opportunity to once again play with the Jets. If he can put out some good tape, maybe he gets an opportunity to compete somewhere else. But at this point, he's probably just a high-end backup. Who would be more on the hot seat with a 116 record, GM or head coach? I think both would be. I believe if they're 1-16, both are going to be on the hot seat. I would say of the two, Joe Douglas would be, just because he will have had 2 full drafts and 2 full off seasons. And once again, I have to preach patience, and I have to say, look, Joe Douglas, I believe that he can do well. I mean, you look at the draft he had last year, I think he had a very good draft, and people are quick to point out, well, his 2020 draft was terrible. But for the 2020 draft, we also have to keep in mind that he was drafting for a vastly different head coach with a vastly different offensive defensive scheme. And a lot of these guys don't necessarily fit the scheme right now. I know Denzel Mims is the hot button issue, and I believe he should be playing more, but Mims doesn't really fit this system as well as a guy like Elijah Moore fits this system. I mean, Mekhi Becton, unfortunately, hasn't been able to stay healthy. That's been frustrating. That's been the other thing with these drafts is a lot of these players have been hurt. I mean, Ashton Davis has been hurt, and he's looked okay since he came back, but nothing special. And look, the Jets are basically making up for a decade of poor drafts. I mean, we're talking about second rounders that can't even get to the field, guys that can't even make the roster. And I get that there were some bad picks, like the James Morgan pick was a bad pick. And look, there's some bad picks, but that was also his first draft as a general manager. And it seems like in the second draft, he learned from that first one, and it looks like it's a lot better draft. I mean, they've gotten a lot of key contributors on day 3. Looks like they found a future Pro Bowl guard in the draft. I mean, we have to see what Zach Wilson turns out to be, but so far, I mean, I really think his draft was really good. But once again, I mean, Robert Saleh is going to be a first-year head coach, and it will be a bad look at 1-16. But Joe Douglas is also the guy that gave him this roster. And then basically through 2 full drafts, he'll have 3 wins, and that's not going to be good enough. I don't see this team being 1-16. The good news for the Jets is they have 4 games where I believe that they should win at least 2, which is the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Dolphins. Wilson should be back for those 4. Now, after last week's performance, do you feel great about facing those teams? No. And if the Jets lose all 4 games to those teams, I mean, then it's fair to say all of those guys are on the hot seat. I mean, 1-16 is really bad. It's really, really bad. And in some ways, you don't want to see teams overreact and panic and bail. But if the Jets were going to do it, then it would be a more attractive place, more for the GM than the coach. But then you could say you got a boatload of draft picks, you have a bunch of cap space. But really, I just think that they're not going to really make a significant change because the guy gets out these 2 years. And Joe Douglas, the big plan is for him, and what I believe is going to help save his job, even if this team only wins like 2 or 3 games, is the plan was to build through the draft, and the plan was to accumulate picks. And really, they have that trove of draft picks, but once again, they have to hit on them. But if he has a good draft next year, coupled with what's looking like a good draft this year, and they do well in free agency, you could see this team turning it around. So I do think that is a great question, Solomon. If anyone has any other questions, again, chat's open. Send some questions if you have anything about the game, about the Jets in general, about basically anything. So I would love to answer your questions, but that was a good question. So once again, Flacco, if I had to say more of a panic, it's more of the GM, but it's not really a desperation move. But again, if this team goes 116, I don't think anyone is safe. And the other thing too is I know I talked about Woody Johnson early in the show, but now he's back in charge. And if they're 1-16, they're the laughing stock of the NFL and they're embarrassed. Woody Johnson has been very quick to pull the trigger, and he can almost use the excuse basically saying, like, to the new, if they have to get a new head coach and general manager, saying, look, like, I know we said we were going to be patient with these guys, but these were also people that my brother brought in. And, I want to bring in my own guys, and I believe in you guys. But it definitely, 116, nothing can be off the table. So, any other question, guys, before we head out? Of course, I've been reading what you guys have been putting in the polls, which are also in the community page of the YouTube channel. I saw what video you guys selected this week. That will be worked on shortly. And of course, we will have that out to you very quickly. NFL trading deadline coming up. That will be very intriguing as well. We will, of course, have a reaction to any Jets trades and, of course, the deadline in general. It's going to be fascinating who gets moved for this Jet team because, in a way, I think everyone's pretty much available outside of maybe Quinnen Williams and Zach Wilson, of course. But it is kind of funny, though, because watching the game last week, I thought CJ Mosley could be a guy that the Jets would move. But with all the injuries at linebacker and it's clear how impactful he is on the field as basically the defensive coach, I think it's going to be tough to move him. I'd be surprised if Marcus May gets moved now. Solomon, Jets need to get linebackers. I agree. They need them, but I don't think they're going to trade assets to get a linebacker. I think they're going to look more on the waiver market or see if anyone gets cut from a practice squad or sign a practice squad. A guy like Quincy Williams, how they were able to get him off the waiver wire. So I think if you're going to see the Jets add linebackers, it's going to be the waiver wire. Once again, they get Jared Davis back. They get CJ Mosley back. And it's going to be fun to watch them because really we haven't seen Jared Davis, and we've heard how good he was in camp. How good he's been impactful on the field. And when you think about it, he was one of the big key free agent signings this offseason. So you want to see how he does. And with both of them on the field, that can make a big impact. Of course, you want to see this team add some depth, but in terms of adding players, I don't see them unless they're basically giving a 7th-round pick. I don't see Joe Douglas giving up a high end, even like a 5th or a 6th-round pick to get players on this team now to fill in. If anything, he's going to go to the waiver wire or a team's practice squad to try to find someone. I just don't see him really giving out premium picks or premium players to go and try and get linebacking depth. Although I agree, they do need linebacking depth. I think Blake Cashman's career with the Jets is going to be over. Once again, McCagnon pick, guy who's got a lot of talent, but he cannot stay healthy. So I think his Jet career is pretty much going to be over at the end of this year. It's frustrating about Sherwood, who was showing a lot of potential at linebacker. Hamza, it'll be interesting if he's back. I haven't seen the injury update on him for this week, but I know Davis is back. CJ Mosley's been a full participant in practice, so that is very encouraging and feels like the Jets are trying to get him back on the field after the embarrassment last week as well. Just want to see if you guys have any last minute questions before we wrap this up. Once again, the live chat is open. Would love to answer any questions you have about the Jets, of course, about the deadline, about the game this weekend. So I'll give you guys another minute or two to submit your questions if you have any. Of course, we got more Jets content coming up next week. Once again, we will be giving our analysis of the trade deadline, which is next Monday, I believe. Yeah, the second. So actually Tuesday. So basically, the Jets have until then to make a move. I'll be curious to see what Joe Douglas does at the deadline. I don't think I think a lot of Jet fans are almost going to be disappointed because if they're going to get anyone, it's going to be a player that's probably a rental. And if they go and get someone, I think it might be a tight end. I would like to see him go after Hayden Hurst or OJ Howard, just of how thin the tight end is. But once again, if Joe Douglas has to give up a fourth round pick or a quality day 3 pick, I don't think he's going to do that because he wants to have as many draft picks as possible. I mean, one interesting scenario I've been thinking of that to me makes sense is Marcus May for OJ Howard. And if the Buccaneers also throw in like a 5th round pick with that, just because then it gives the Jets a tight end. If it doesn't work out, they can let him go in free agency. But he's a tight end with a lot of upside. And really, the Jets have no targets over the middle of the field with their tight ends. And plus, it would give Howard or Hurst if they go after one of those two. The big thing is Zach Wilson, and the nice thing that if you trade for a tight end now is that by the time Wilson's back, that they'll be up to speed with the playbook and that they'll be ready to go once he's back. So I do think that's interesting. Where are you seeing for the home game? I'm not going this week. I went last week to the one up in Foxborough. I'm going to my first home game for at least competition this weekend. I think every Jet fan is looking for that too. And it'll be interesting too at MetLife. If this team is not competing and they look dead, there's going to be a lot of boos. And for the Jet players, like I know players hate getting booed, but once again, it's like with the Giant fans this year, it's not necessarily the game, it's the frustration of the how long this has been going on about all the mistakes. And really, I think it almost will be if they are frustrated, if they are booing, it's more or less that it's not necessarily the Bengals game. It's going to be that they didn't have a chance to vent their frustration at the Patriot game and how bad the team was there. So if the Jet fans are booing, that's why. Carlos, another question. Which position would you have prioritized last offseason? IMO, what would have been center other than quarterback, of course? Corey Linsley would have been nice. Yeah, I would like to see Corey Linsley. But the problem was, and it was very clear from a lot of the beat writers that the Jets wanted Lindsey, but more or less that they wanted to go after Tooney, who went with the Chiefs. But it became very clear that not only were the guys going to be super expensive, but they didn't have any interest in the Jets. And I get why. They want to go to teams that are competitive. And unless the Jets gave a ridiculous offer where they are vastly overpaying than everyone else, which I believe Douglas would have overpaid, but not grossly overpay. I think that the biggest thing was outside of quarterback, which I've been screaming for a veteran quarterback. I would have liked to see them add more in the tight end group, especially when you see Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both those guys going to New England. I would have liked to see one of those. I would have liked to see them get one tight end in free agency just to help, because you're going to have a young quarterback. So you want to give him that security blanket over the middle with the tight end. So tight end to me was probably the biggest miss because the Jets had the worst tight ends in the NFL. I don't think anyone can debate that. And there were some decent tight ends, and I get that they were expensive and probably overpaid for. But when you have the abundance of cap space that you do and you have a young quarterback, I mean, you look at Mac Jones. You think Mac Jones is complaining that he has 2 tight ends to throw to over the middle of the field? I mean, basically, if Mac Jones isn't throwing to tight ends or the running backs, I mean, he maybe throws a couple of the receivers, but that's who he's looking for. I mean, that is that's what he would look for in the middle. I agree, Humphreys, whatever his name is, in my mock draft. I think we would have missed out on AVT. Yeah, the Jets. I think Elijah Vera Tucker was the best interior offensive lineman in the draft. I think that was a smart pick. Humphreys was a guy I was really on. One guy I actually was getting mad, and if you go back on my Twitter, you can actually see me getting really pissed at the Jets, which was in my scouting. One of the guards I had the higher grade on was Trey Smith. I really love this kid out of Tennessee. He was nasty, he was physical, but he had a heart condition. So the talent to me was he was a second round draft pick, but he fell to the sixth round. And every time on day 3, the Jets kept taking players and corners, especially that run of defensive backs and safeties. And I kept getting pissed and I kept saying, draft Trey Smith, draft Trey Smith. And now you look, he's playing well for City. Now, once again, it also helps that you get to play with Andy Reid in Kansas City. But I was like, this is a guy who could be starting. He could be starting. And I'm sorry, but I'm actually going to walk it back a little bit. The biggest miss of the offseason was not realizing that you need to get a better option than Greg Van Roten as your right guard, or as I like to call him, Greg Van Rotten, because he is horrendous. I mean, I've been saying I would like to see even Feeney get an opportunity. So Solomon Jets, I've been doing mocks, and New York Giants keep picking Weidemeyer in the first round. LOL. But look, I get it scared you all. And look, I get Trey Smith, the health scared people off. But I was saying, look, if I can get a starting potential caliber guard in the 6th round, I'm going to take a shot. I mean, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out with Trey Smith. It's like, okay, they took a swing in the 6th round. You don't take a swing like that in the 2nd or 3rd round. I get it. But when we're in the 5th or 6th round, and a lot of those guys you're just hoping make the roster, and I'm saying, like, look, the interior guard position, I mean, even with Cameron Clark, who's a guy I was high on before he got unfortunately hurt in training camp, I was looking at the interior offensive line. I'm like, I know they got Feeney. I know they got Clark, but it's not like, wow, they have great internal offensive line depth. And I'm thinking at the very least, Smith would be a valuable backup. So, but he's playing well in Kansas City. I would love to see the Jets try to bring in another guard, but it'll be tough because teams don't just trade linemen like that. But it's frustrating too because I think a lot of Jet fans are getting sick and tired of Greg Van Roten because he's been so bad. And to me, that was the biggest oversight. And unfortunately, I think it's been a big oversight on Douglas because if you look at the statistics and you look at the rankings and you look at the performance, the offensive line, even without Becton, which we have to also consider, the line outside of Van Roten hasn't been bad. They've actually been pretty good. I mean, Connor McGovern has been better this year. George Fant has been surprisingly really good this year. Morgan Moses has been solid. Elijah Vera Tucker has been really good. But the problem is Greg Van Roten's been so bad that it just brings down this whole group. Like, I love you look at the PFF grades. It was 1 week I remember, like, Vera Tucker was like an 80. Connor McGovern was like a 70. George Fant was like a 70. And then you look at Greg Van Roten was like 35. You're like, and I think the Jets gave up 4 sacks that week, and it said 3 of them from Greg Van Roten. So that to me is the biggest oversight because he's been so bad, it's brought down this entire offensive line. And I actually would like to see, and I know Feeney's not a good player. I get that, but just give him an opportunity. It's almost like it can't be worse than Greg freaking Van Roten. I mean, it can't be. So, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up with the draft because, like, I was banging the desk for Trey Smith, and like I said earlier, because someone asked about like if I had to do a mock draft, I think they're going to take an offensive lineman and a pass rusher, or maybe with a receiver. I mean, heck, I wouldn't be shocked. The Jets took 2 offensive linemen in this upcoming draft. So I mean, at least that's been a silver lining is that Geno Smith has played the Jets into 2 top 10 picks. I don't think Seattle is going to finish with a top 10 pick, but I do think it'll be a high teens pick, which will be just of trying because Russell Wilson it will come back eventually. It'll be interesting too because they play Jacksonville this week, and if they lose to Jacksonville, that actually helps the Jets because it gets Jacksonville out of that spot near the Jets, but then it also gives once again Seattle a worse draft pick. So, but once again, we got the deadline coming up, lots to talk about. We will, of course, give our reaction after the game when the Jets take on the Bengals, analysis of Mike White. And this will be our final question from Grafton Will, because I feel Mike LaFleur gets a lot of heat because drives Hall with the Jets being themselves between drop passes and just got awful line play. LaFleur, I do think, is getting a bit of too much criticism, but again, when you're a rookie play caller, and I do feel bad for LaFleur because I just think he's a little bit overwhelmed because he's a first-time offensive coordinator and play caller. I mean, that's a lot. And oh, by the way, you have a rookie quarterback and you don't necessarily have great offensive pieces. I mean, when you don't have a great running game, you don't have a consistent running game, you have a so-so offensive line and a rookie. It's just, you're just fighting uphill to begin with and trying to learn on the job. But I just think that LaFleur, I mean, I get it. I mean, he's the easy scapegoat. The offense has been terrible, so let's blame the offensive coordinator. But I need to see more innovation out of him. I need to see more creativity, especially now when you have your backup quarterback. You need to be more creative, and you need to find a way to get your playmakers like Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims involved. You just need to figure that out. And with LaFleur, I get why Jet fans are frustrated. They have every right to be frustrated because he hasn't called a good game, and they've been inconsistent with the play call. So, but that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Remember, we will be doing these every week. So if you keep checking the community part of the channel, you can submit your questions. I'll make sure to write that up and we will get to them in these chats. We will also have a lot coming up this upcoming week with the NFL trade deadline, our reactions to what the Jets will do and won't do at the deadline. And of course, we will be giving you a breakdown of the Jets-Bengals game when that game concludes live here. Make sure you have your questions and make sure you get that subscribe button so you don't miss the next live stream. And of course, hit that like button. We want to get this out to as many Jet fans as possible and grow this community as big as we can. But thank you guys so much for joining us here today. Until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk.